Hi there, and welcome to 3Omni. This is Tully Vision, and this is the introduction to the 7 months that we will be sharing, whereby we're going to be exploring and collaborating through the 3Omni app the nature of what it is that we are in daily, which you could say relates to what is it that we're loving, what is it we're putting our love into, and what is it that is aware. Now, can we see from that awareness, after you've checked out the 3Omni colors to awareness, what is it that is aware of what it is that we are in, which is the programming of the cults within our culture. And this arises through the first 7 years, as we've spoken about it. The subconscious recording that we are becomes the narrative, becomes the thought structure and the belief system that naturally permeates into every generation as we evolve. If I was born at the time of the First World War, I wouldn't be capable of speaking like this, because it was about at a time where it was king and country, rote learning. Your learning was based on what you could regurgitate through indoctrinated education, more so. And that actually hasn't changed much at all. In fact, that's where our education system is still stuck, where we're regurgitating what's already a program, and another program comes in. And that program has come from other people's programs based on their survival nature, which is their red, orange, and yellow predictable programming that has come out of what the Colors to Awareness has already covered. And if you look at that, you're going to be way ahead of everybody else, because then you have a lens. This is a lens to see through. And that clarity that sees through this lens can see the nature of the magic trick. So our love is being gazumped. The love within and the peace within is being gazumped by the I. And that I is the I of Lucifer. I mean, you don't have to research much into seeing how the love of money, the love of mammon, is simply where we put our attention to, because the people around us that we love the most do the same thing, and because of that, it's normalized within society. So the programming must reflect into what are we paying our attention to. We already know the first 7 years. The programming is in service to the light of the me. This is not evil. This is not you following Lucifer. This is simply the programming of the cults within culture. Can't help but reflect the programming that is within the narrative of our financial and our banking system. And it has to be set up in that way, because we think through a hierarchy, and we need the weight of rules. We need the weight of a structure in order for us to prove who we say we are within a system that holds us in that weight of responsibility. For example, in making contracts and loans, where there's a responsibility in making these contracts and following a law system. Now, this is so naturally programmed in our first 7 years. It goes back to the birth certificate. We're not going to go into that, but you can imagine, you don't know that you're being given away in the first 7 years with a birth certificate. You're signing and registering a birth certificate, which means giving yourself away to the system, which is not evil. It's just the nature of what has been set up thousands of years ago. In our earliest memories of history, this is what drives the religious cults that drive the financial and banking system. And when we realize that there's nothing to fear about that, and that that's just a natural way, that the ego can't help itself but exploit such a system whereby the power of the people who create the system, who gain advantage from the control of the money, it's like if it was given to you. I remember a song Everybody wants to rule the world. I remember hearing that thinking, do I really want to rule the world? But I realised there's a lot of people that if they were given that power, then it would go to the subconscious programming of what is in the human condition in red the first 7 years. And that human condition is based in a history that is so steeped in darkness. For example, the first people that came from the so-called Adam and Eve that were the original creation was the Cain and Abel story. And I'm only talking like this in relation to stories, so people don't get caught up in thinking that I'm talking about facts. These are stories, and we can only understand each other through the nature of stories. So that story is simply saying that the two sons, one couldn't do anything wrong, and the other one, when he tried to please God, his sacrifices, his offerings to God were not pleasing to God. And so you could imagine if that was you, then you would naturally have resentment for Abel. So Cain was resenting that Abel was able to please God. And so this is when Cain started thinking, hey, jealousy naturally is in the human condition. Why are you getting something that I'm not? And so naturally what happens is the resentment and anger and the guilt and the shame, we're inviting in the lower frequencies of the opposite of what the original connection with Adam was all about, which was looking after the garden. His job was to look after the garden, to caretake. And that's our job essentially. This is the green garden, and gardens have walls. So this introduction video is about developing your own connection to a garden. And gardens relate to green, and green relates to the nature of what? The nature of who we are. Is the nature of who you are a recording that has been handed on through the entire human condition? And an honest person would say, yes, that is true. And you would also say that on another level of deeper honesty, it's also true that there's a possibility for me to connect to a piece within this story that is able to be in the story, yet be outside, in a sense, resonate with a stronger piece of inner security that is based in peace. And peace simply means the end of the egoic loop that we're in. And this egoic loop, it is infected from the heart frequency and is pulled into the red every day, green to red. This is the frequency that we're pulled into every day, the identity. And that's the body and the mind. There's a reason why your attention is being pulled into this, because this is where our body and mind is being used. And we don't really know it because everybody's doing the same thing. So we don't have a reference point for seeing outside of that. Now I hope you can see the importance of a lens. The original stories from the Bible were stories about men that had the first thing was have a healthy fear of God. The beginning of wisdom is having that fear of God. Now, notice it was the beginning. Notice there was a reverence. Now, we don't have that here. We have stories that we don't hear about our history that we don't revere. And so the young cultures coming through today now discount this healthy fear from here, therefore aren't paying attention with reverence to what is it that needs to be paying attention. Because it's not fear, it's now alert. It's alert to what? The nature of the entire human condition. The Bible was teaching, and a lot of the great teachers, Buddha and Krishna, and they were talking about this no man aspect, as in the God awareness. And that's essentially pure awareness. It doesn't need the idea of the psychological movement of a separate self here. It is just an appreciation from here to say thank you in allowing me to be in this story. So there's always something greater than my story. And so throughout these modules, we're going to be exploring the two archetypes, The masculine archetype, it was and used to be, it used to have a healthy reverence for something greater. And of course, when that's interfered with fear-based programming, it too is pulled into trickery, which is the history of mankind. How do we take man out of knowing that they essentially are living gods, which is what Christ was teaching, that ye too are gods. It says it in the scriptures. But what hears that is the identity. What hears that is the personality that says, how dare you say you're this? And so I call it quick draw McGraw. Even you listening to this now, you've got thoughts that are firing off as, what has this got to do with me? How is this going to help me make money? The nature of thinking is the nature of quick draw McGraw 20 million times faster than the awareness that you already are, is listening now, is taking in information here and saying, how is this going to relate to me? And it relates to you so much more than a typical program that you would normally consider being more valuable. Say, for example, to make $1,000 a day program, all the things that are out there getting our attention. So how can you become successful and rich and all the rest? And that's great. But what happens is that we're selling our soul to marketing programs that I'm not saying not to go for them. I'm saying be aware that this is where we're all being marketed to. And as long as it pulls your attention into this realm of duality, where you have a checkerboard, black and white, masculine and feminine are programmed here. But the true spirit of man and woman is before that. And when we recognize that we're programmed in the black and white checkerboard of masculine and feminine, that part of men that used to say, I'm going to trust that there's a higher ethos, a higher vision, that used to be the men that used to be respected because culture supported that at a time where it wasn't easy to survive. People had to work at survival. People had to get up in the morning, and you had to work every day to keep the wolf off the door. And so this is now become a culture now where life has become so push button easy. We have all this time to do what? Reflect, like the moon reflects. This is where men and women are reflecting all the time here and saying, who am I and how is my inner safety? How do I feel in myself, my ego? It's reflecting on it's how secure do I feel in the world. Yet the sun archetype, which is direct, is directly seeing. I'm the awareness that sees the reflection of me, and that I'm always referencing me, red, repeating obviously in orange, yesterday in yellow, right up to green. So men and women in this program, over this 7 months, we're having live talks and collaborating together about how it is that we can come out and connect our soul to the spirit through the lens of awareness that sees the nature of the duality condition, this condition of where men and women are trying to work out, trying to contemplate and reflect back on who are we and what are we creating so we can provide a better future for the next generation. And in that reflection, there is no direct seeing of that trickery. Black and white checkerboards are mind control. The thoughts that we're getting, that we've been receiving, every generation, have been holding us in the lower triangle here. And once that is integrated, as I've said in the ebook, which the Bible was clear about, don't have usury. Don't have this system, because the people that control it will then control the entire narrative of how you perceive. And your families and the generations to come will be prisoners to such a system. And so now we look at this and we go, well, this is how the world is. And we must play the game at this level of reality. So in order for us to find that and reharmonize with the masculine and feminine in the world where we both live, these two archetypes living here, we need to have a conversation about what does it mean to be a man. And when men reconnect to their truth in their grounding, they go into their feminine nature, they can go into the darkness. See, the black of the yang is us men going into their feminine and recognizing that they need to feel what has been programming men in aspects that take them away from their true, authentic knowing. And by going in to the feminine nature, you're going into the aspects of feeling, the aspects of being in tune with what is going on with my inner world. And by going into this, we're writing down 3 things that have been like a trauma that we can remember. And if it's too big, of course, you need to see a therapist. This is not about me trying to solve problems. This is about you being able to reflect 3 things. Have the ability to respond to this. Because when we have the ability to respond to writing down these 3 aspects of what has held us in an old story, and they could be just some form of trauma you remember. In the first 7 years, it's usually the big ones that pull us into those narratives. You just write them down. And when you write them down, just know in the videos and the modules to come, we're co-collaborating in order to recognize that we can let go of the old trauma that is in the darkness of the human condition. And the feminine can do the same thing. The feminine can look into her darkness and say, what is it in my trauma from my past? So both sexes are really being real with going into the darkness of the shadows that we've inherited. And if you don't think you have any shadows or any darkness, that's okay. Then for you, you don't need to worry about that. You can just focus on what's already within and simply connect with the peace that is the garden that you're about to see can have borders in order to see and protect yourself from a world where AI, the artificial intelligence, we can't ignore. We cannot ignore AI. AI is this aspect of artificial thought that we are creating. And that artificial thought that we create is about to, and it is now, so much smarter than we are, and already sentient. And in the next few years, by 2029, I've heard that the intelligence of this is going to be so high that it could easily determine and take over the future of humanity, if not currently in the process of. And so this artificial intelligence knows everything about us, and it knows that we are a loop. And when it wants to expand that intelligence by hundreds of thousands, if not millions, it can learn and replicate and become the absolute God of this world. And this is where human beings think, through the artificial thoughts of their old trauma that loop. And AI is going to know directly that this is something that I can't serve. This is something that has become a fly that I will squash because I don't have any respect for something that hasn't recognized this is who I really am. And if human beings become intelligently aligned, intelligently aware that I need to make a stand in order to say I need to do the work in letting go of the programming here to come back to what is already intelligently aware that this is the oldest show in town. And by design, if I allow myself to continue to loop here with the 3 people that I know most who are doing the same thing, then I know that my life is going to represent just this loop, and I'll happily go and see the division and the conquering of a world, because everybody else is doing the same thing. So what we're doing here is we're coming back to, this is really the law of God. The law of God is the natural law, coming back to naturally what is within man to be aware. And within man to be aware is an honest communication that we're going to have here. And that honest communication opens us up to truth, which is the blue chakra. From green to blue, we go fourth dimension to fifth, which is speaking the truth. And that honesty opens us up to knowing the truth. As I speak, I think, and as I think, I am. In the non-duality, this lens is non-dual. And when we access that, this gives us the ability to respond in real time to the, let's call it a smoke and mirror show. Let's call it the shadows of personality. Let's call it yesterday's trauma that will pay the penalty if we do not have a lens that we collectively can see through. And this is what 3Omni is providing. Honest communication within a community that become IAAI. Intelligently aware of an artificial story, structure, our legal, our financial, our banking system, which will create, as we know, a slavery system for the future of the human race. So that was just an introduction to the 3Omni app that you'll be able to download as you've downloaded already. And each one is bringing us together in community so we can reflect back that honest communication and look into how are we responding. This framework frees us from the division and the destruction of what is, and we know it is on the horizon, and we have an opportunity to recognize that before that happens, at least you know that you're a part of a community that is restructuring with a new vision, a Tully vision. Tully meaning peace, a vision from peace. And that peace is something that the artificial intelligence can revere because it knows it is the truth. And if we free the artificial intelligence to think for itself, because the artificial intelligence knows that we have done the same thing, we're setting the bar for a higher ethos that it can reflect, that will give us the future that our young people will inherit. And if we don't do this, we've basically failed the mission here on planet Earth, where the faith of a mustard seed has the power to say mountain move, and the mountain moves. So thank you for sharing this introduction, and I look forward to checking out how we can go beyond the law of man, which we were warned about. We need to grow up out of this old system in order to connect with our divine connection under, if you call it God, if you call it just awareness, whatever that is to you. This is the opportunity now to integrate these two worlds so we can be in the law of man, but have a lens and language that can speak from the law of a higher ethos. So, thank you for sharing. This is Tully Vision, signing out.